Hello everyone, welcome back to our course. Last time, we talked about the use of critical thinking in analyzing the author's intention. Today, we'll discuss the importance of using critical thinking in discovering and clarifying ambiguity. Ambiguity means that meaning can be interpreted in many ways. There are two types of ambiguity: lexical ambiguity and syntactical ambiguity. For example, the school had many poor students on scholarships. Poor can be understood as either having very little money, 贫穷的, or not doing well in study, 成绩差的. And this is a lexical ambiguity. Here is another example. He didn't marry her because he loved her. There are two explanations. He loved her, so he didn't marry her. 他因为爱她，所以没有与她结婚。Or he married her not because he loved her. 他不是因为爱她才与她结婚的。Which is a syntactical ambiguity. Ambiguity may be intentionally created by the author, such as the use of puns, metaphors, and other vague language to express their feelings. However, it may also be unintentionally used by the author, such as a specific time, location, or occasion in a speech or writing. There would be no ambiguity, but the reader didn't understand the background, and then the ambiguity emerged. There are many cases of intentional use of ambiguity in literary works, scriptures, and so on. But even in the scriptures, most of the ambiguities in the original text are caused by our ignorance of the cultural and historical background of the text. Namely, such ambiguity is not deliberate created by the author. On the contrary, the ambiguity in the informational text is mostly caused by the author unconsciously. But it doesn't rule out that there are also intentional ambiguities. For example, legal regulations, political decisions, and so on, which originally require clarity, but sometimes they have to be vague in order to cater for different interests, so that all parties can interpret according to their own meanings, and they'll figure out ways when they encounter problems in the implementation process. In processing the ambiguity, it is very difficult to translate the ambiguity created by the author intentionally, because translators may not find an equivalent word in the target language that has the same ambiguity as the original word. Usually, translators need to think of many ways, such as annotation or explanation, to translate this ambiguity. In many cases, the translators may not notice the ambiguity in their original text at all, but only translate one of the meanings. Regarding how to translate the ambiguity deliberately created by the author, I will not discuss it in detail here. Okay, for the ambiguity unintentionally caused by the author, critical reading and critical thinking should be used when translating. And the author's true meaning should be inferred through context, background knowledge, common sense, and logic, then conveyed accurately. Judging from common sense, the above-mentioned, the school had many poor students on scholarships. I'm afraid it can only refer to students having very little money. From a logical point of view, he didn't marry her because he loved her. I think it can only be interpreted as he married her not because he loved her. 他不是因为爱她才与她结婚的。Let's take a look at a few more examples on how to use critical thinking to analyze the unintentional ambiguity. Example 1. Please read the original text and pay attention to the highlighted sentence. 据1992年组织进行的第2次全国肝炎流行病学调查结果表明，中国人群中乙肝病毒平均感染率在 60% 左右，表面抗原阳性携带者近 10%。 Here comes the question. Is this 10% out of 60%? Or is it parallel to 60%? This is an ambiguity caused by the syntactic structure. It is difficult to find the answer from the language itself. Following is a literal translation. Findings of the 1992 National Epidemiological Investigation for Hepatitis showed that hepatitis B virus infections among the Chinese population groups averaged about 60%. Nearly 10% had a positive surface antigen. But the meaning is vague. Using Google to search for information out of the text, we can find that this 10% refers to 10% of the Chinese population. So the translation should be, the National Epidemiological Investigation for Hepatitis conducted in 1992 found that among different Chinese population groups, an average of about 60% were infected with HBV, hepatitis B virus, and nearly 10% were HBsAg, hepatitis B surface antigen carriers. Okay, let's move on to another example. In Kingsoft Power Word 2002, hayride is defined as follows. A ride taken for amusement, usually by a group of people in the evening, in a wagon or other vehicle piled with hay or straw. 乘装有干草的无棚卡车夜游，常指一群人在夜间乘坐马车或其他装着干草或麦秸的车辆进行的娱乐性旅行。No matter whether the translation of other parts is accurate or not, let's take a look at the translation of the phrase in a wagon or other vehicle piled with hay or straw. Shall we translate it as 马车或其他装着干草或麦秸的车辆 or 装着干草或麦秸的马车或者其他车辆 I think, according to the logic, it is not difficult to judge. The latter is better. To sum up, a sentence can have multiple interpretations when there's no context. Once the context is determined, there is only one interpretation, unless the author is playing a word game. And a use of the critical thinking will be very helpful in figuring out the appropriate translation. In the next section, we'll talk about the use of critical thinking in analyzing and using reference materials. That's all for this class. Thank you, and see you next time.